Okay, Boker Tov. One of the halachot, which sometimes I think because we're so familiar, maybe we get into habits that are a little bit b'di'avad, should we say, when it comes to putting on tefillin, is the proper placement of Tefillin Shel Rosh. There's two specific parts of the Tefillin Shel Rosh we want to talk about today. Number one, the bayit, the placement of the box, if you will, and the kesher, the knot in the back. Mishnah Berurah goes to speak at length. Then it's very common for people to misplace the proper place of the bayit. Basically, he says the bottom part of the bayit, which is the front part of the bayit, that has to be from the roots of the hair and up. Some people, he says, let the bayit slip ahead of where the roots of the hair are, and that's inappropriate. Sometimes there are even extreme cases. I was at a brit not so long ago, and because I was praying there with the minyan, so I saw somebody had the bayit almost completely in front of the roots of his hair. So it was so blatant that I offered to tighten his knot. And after I tightened it, I could see he was like looking at his friends, an older person looking at his friends, like, what kind of business is this? The Tefillin Shel Rosh is completely out of place, he felt. For years and years, he's been putting it very, very low. But in fact, it's the opposite. Mishnah Berurah quotes a Gemara, which is a rather alarming Gemara. The Gemara says that Poshei Yisrael v'mot ha'olam begufan, those who are from the Poshei Yisrael, those who are from the sinners of Yisrael with their bodies, as opposed to with their hashkafot, with their bodies. So the Gemara describes the process of Gehinom for them. And the Gemara says, who are the Poshei Yisrael begufan? What's an example? The Gemara says the famous line, Karkavta de lo manach tefillin. A person who does not put on tefillin on his head. Tosfot explain exactly what the kind of case is that a person doesn't put on tefillin. But the Mishnah Berurah says a person whose tefillin are on the wrong spot of his head, specifically where the bayit, then his karkafta de lo manach tefillin is considered Poshei Yisrael begufan. And it's very unfortunate because he's not malicious, obviously. He just doesn't know any better. So therefore, a person should be very careful. And the front part of the tefillin is, according to the advice of Mishnah Berurah, not merely by the roots, or where the roots, if a person doesn't have hair there, would be, but they're even a little bit further back, because we hold that there's really place for two batim shel rosh on a person's head. So you don't have to be so exact. Put the front of the tefillin a little bit above the beginning part of the roots. This is relatively well known. One thing which I think needs more chizuk is the placement of the knot in the back of the tefillin. The Mishnah Berurah clarifies, based on Maran says Shulchan Aruch, tzarich she'yeh hakesher me'achorei harosh lema'ala ba'oref. It has to be high up. This the high up part of the back of his head, which is his nape. Now, what does that mean? So, if you follow with your finger, you'll find that at some point your skull, which is hard, stops and gets soft. And that's what the Mishnah Berurah calls the guma, the indentation. Really, the proper placement of the Tefillin Shel Rosh, the knot, should be be'ikar on the hard part, the skull, the bone. And you could have a little bit dipping into the guma. But for many people, it's really quite the opposite. Almost the entire knot has fallen backwards into the soft part. And that is certainly b'di'avad. What's worse is sometimes you find that it's even lower than that, it goes onto the neck, which is the part where there is no hair growth. And that is sort of far worse. But lechatchila is what we want to aim for, which is that the knot should be tight enough, meaning the ritzuah, the strap should be tight enough, that the knot is primarily on the skull, the hard part, with a little bit dipping into that guma, into that indentation on the back of the head. This, I think, is what Mishnah Berurah says. He says, for two reasons, the Tefillin Shel Rosh, the knot, should be tight. First of all, we have halacha ukshartem, that it has to be tightened, it has to be wrapped around. That applies to the head also, it should be tight. And the additional benefit is that when it's loose, the Tefillin Shel Rosh slide backwards, forwards. So a person really wants to make sure, and it's kedai to bring it to somebody who knows how to tighten, which I could do for you, but you should make sure that the Tefillin Shel Rosh, the ritzuah, is relatively tight. It should not feel like there's all this room. It should be pretty much exact, that the tefillin, the bayit, will land in the front, above the hairline, where it's supposed to be, and the Tefillin Shel Rosh, the back, the kesher, should be pretty much on the hard part.